Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lizzie Borden
Tea and murder.
podcast, Tea and Murder. And we're so glad to have you here today. And welcome to Oh, let me turn down my volume
Tea and
here.
murder.
Shoot. Okay, there we go. So, there's a thing on Facebook. I'm hoping everyone can tune in because apparently it's not coming up. Facebook did some changes and I don't know exactly what they did. So Kenny put a YouTube link up there. It's right on the top. It says Kenneth Paul Graham, and underneath there's a YouTube link you can go to tune in. So I hope you're going there instead. Um, we'll see. So anyway, we have a couple things we want to do before we get started with Billy. And first thing I want to mention is, and this is really off on a side note, has nothing to do with Lizzie Borden, but everything to do with me. Thank you for all of everyone that is voting for me for my TV show, Raw Urban Sessions, which was nominated for 2 awards in the Community Media Award category of Best Music and Best Entertainment Show of the Year. It's a tight race, but everybody just keep voting. There's 2 days left, and they make everybody vote every day for I think it was 21 days. It's exhausting, but thank you so much everyone for doing that for me, and I appreciate it. Okay, so the other thing that Shelly and I decided to do, we wanted to mention two of our friends that lost people or passed away. One is Rena's mom, Joanne, who recently passed away. Rena does our tea segment every show, and I just want to say she was a really lovely lady. She had a huge smile, as you can see. And, we just want to send our prayers and love to Rena. They're in Chivas right now.
Hmm.
Chivas.
She's sitting
And,
Shiva. Yeah.
yeah, Shiva. And we just want to, our love goes out to you, Rena, and your family. Ooh, that was rough. And Shelly, I know we're starting out with real tear triggers here.
Yeah.
Why'd we do this? But we have to mention these, Shelly, and we're going to go to the other person.
Okay. This many will recognize instantly as Leonard Ribello, the author of Lizzie Borden Past and Present, which was published in 1999. And Len, we used to call him the Dean of Jones Street when it came to Lizzie. We would go to Len with all of our pressing questions. Before Len's book, there wasn't a whole lot out there about Lizzie Borden. He worked on this book for years, and I have it right to hand here at my desk. I use it constantly. Um, Len lived in Fall River all of his life. He was a special ed teacher, um, screening for learning disabilities, reading problems. It was wonderful with young people. Uh, his funeral was Friday. It was a tough one. He had a large contingent from Lizzie World, and of course from his school, his uh, education department turned out, and everyone got up and shared their memories. He was the first to really document the facts of the case and some of the real minutia that nobody even knew about Emma and Lizzie and the case. He also had a great section about at the end, along with many maps and drawings, um, Lizzie in pop culture, and he researched Lizzie in dance, Agnes DeMille's Fall River Tragedy, um, the opera, uh, and of course in film. And he didn't miss anything. We've been trying to get him to update uh, past and present because there's been a lot more Lizzie since 1999. But he was a wonderful person. He shared his knowledge. When you were with him, you felt that you were the only one in the world. He gave you his undivided attention. I worked at the Borden House, as you know, for many, many years. And every Friday, Len would come over and hold court in the sitting room on the black sofa. And the guests were so thrilled to meet him. And he sold many books there over the years. His book is the gold standard by which all others are judged. And
Well, I
we
have
miss
to
him so
say,
much.
I definitely read his book and I thought it was one of the better ones out there. I used it for a lot of my research for my book,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
sourced it out.
As
So
has everybody else.
yeah,
Yes. You go to
so
Rebello first, and then
yeah.
maybe, and then also Parallel Lives. Those two are indispensable.
Right.
Indispensable.
If you're a Borden fan and you're looking for two excellent books to read that are factual, those are the two,
Well, he
definitely.
was he was also one of the original mutton eaters, the Second Street Irregulars. It was myself, two other ladies, and Len, Eddie, and Kenny. And now all three of our fellows are gone. It's just us old gals, carrying on the mantle of the Second Street Irregulars, the mutton eaters. So a lot of memories. It was a tough, a tough time last week to get through, as many
Yeah.
people have commented. But we miss you, Lenny, and you know, uh, I'm sure now he knows the truth of what happens on August the 4th. I'm sure one of the first people he bumped into must have been Lizzie Borden. And I'm sure, he knows the answer to all the mysteries by now.
Yeah. So Shelley, do you want to introduce our guest that's been waiting patiently off the side?
Yeah. Well, I wondered whether to call him William or Will or Bill or Billy. And I think if you're a playwright, William looks very distinguished. But yeah, you need a name like that, right? Up in lights on Broadway. But he tells me he likes to be called Billy in chit chat. So, Mr. Billy, it's wonderful to have you with us. And we're going to be talking about Bill's. Is this your first play?
This was my first full length when I wrote it at the time. Yes. I've
Okay,
had other plays since then, but this is my baby.
this is your baby. And it's called Lizzie Borden Life After Death. And what a wonderful title. Who came up with that one?
That was actually I came up with the title, but actually since we've had our reading, I've actually changed the title to it
Oh,
now Lisbeth of Maplecroft, A Tale of Lizzie Borden. Because
Mm.
while I did love the original title, Lizzie Borden Life After Death, I felt like one of the big things that was really central to the story that I wrote was, and I'm getting ahead of myself, I could talk more about it, but I felt like that was a very central thing that I wanted to focus on was like Lisbeth wanting to become this other person, wanting to kind of grow from who she was when she was Lizzie Borden. So that
mhm.
felt important to me. And so I felt the title should reflect that.
Okay. I like that one too. And this is your first full length. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in theater?
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
you're
So
an actor as well, I believe. Yes.
I am, yes. I'm
Yes.
an actor playwright. I received my BFA in 2019 from Adelphi University, which is a lovely college on Long Island. And yeah, when I was in college, I was mainly focusing on acting, but my school had, we called it our capstone, which was our big senior project. And a good colleague of mine at the time when I was a freshman, and she was my mentor for that year, she, for her capstone, had wrote this lovely, lovely play about Nil Gwyn, who, if you don't know, is this fabulous actress who I believe she made a name for herself in The Rover. But yeah, I saw her do that and I was like, wait, I've always been writing. This is tangible. I want to learn this. I want to do this. And yeah, that's when I just kind of started picking it up. I wrote little 10 minutes. I started taking classes on it. And then when the time came to pick the subject of my capstone, I had fallen in love. I'm also a huge musical theater person, and I came across the musical Lizzie, which, if you're unfamiliar, is just a wild show. It's a four women rock opera about the trial
Yes,
of Lizzie Borden, and I
yes.
was obsessed with it. And I was like,
Did you go
oh,
off Broadway to that? Was that on off Broadway?
they were going to bring it off Broadway, but then they canceled the tour, and they canceled the production.
Oh, because
And
I thought they had it in downtown Manhattan for a while, didn't they? Or no?
oh, I know what you're talking about. That was like back in like 2007, I think.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
But I remember
Okay.
they were gonna bring it to New York again in like 2020, and this was before
Oh, okay.
canceling
Before
shows was
COVID.
this was when
Yeah,
canceling shows was novelty.
yeah, yeah. But it has traveled around in various places on
Oh
the road. So you saw that one. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Becky says, I love that Lizzie musical.
Oh,
Yeah, the music
so good.
rocks.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I had Lizzie on the brain, and I was also just studying a lot of classical theater, so like Brecht and Doll's House. And I remember when I was just like doing my own research about the case, the bit about Emma's sudden departure from Maplecroft, that just
Hmm.
kind of hit me. And I was like, ooh, I want to explore that. What were the reasons that led to that? And also, when I was doing my own research, I came across the lesbian affair theory, which, fun fact about me, I came out of the closet my sophomore, junior year of college. And unfortunately, it was not great on the family front. So I had to deal with a lot of very unpleasant things about that. And when I found the lesbian affair theory, like the first documented stuff about it, I was just reading the dialogue between Lizzie and Bridget, and I was like, this just feels so much like queer people coming out of a straight man's mouth. So it was kind of a cathartic thing where it's like, let me channel my own kind of rage or sorrow into what is just really, to me, a very empowering story of growth and trauma and processing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
Now, did you see the film with Chloe Sevigny called Lizzie that came out a few years ago?
So I did see it, but I remember when I was writing it, like that was just when like that film was starting to go into theaters, and I was like, okay, I gotta keep a very far distance away from this because I don't want anything to like sort of influence that or like accidentally copy it. And luckily, when I finally
Um,
finished my draft, I saw the film and I'm like, okay, it is the lesbian affair theory, but it
yes.
is a very different take, and I'm very
Mhm.
happy about that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Chloe did come to the house and stayed a few times. Um, she went just full tilt Lizzie. She was captivated, as are many, people once they come to the house. So, Billy, have you stayed at Second Street? Have you been to the house?
I've never stayed the night. I wanted to, but unfortunately not. But
Oh,
when I was writing my play, I did like I had never done like a spring break thing like typical college kids. But senior
mhm.
year came around, I was like, screw it. I am taking a research trip. I'm gonna quote that for my I'm gonna call it that for my capstone. But I am driving out, and me and a couple of friends, we stayed in Fall River. We got to visit the house. We visited Maplecroft, the cemetery, and it was
Yeah.
just lovely just like getting to like it's so strange. I remember walking into the house and the first thing that hit me was just how small and how connected everything was. Like there's
Yes.
no hallways at all. So literally it's just you can imagine all of these people on top of each other. And
Hmm.
that family dynamic we already know was not great to begin with. So to put them all kind of cramped together, it's like just it got my gears turning in the best way possible.
So, how much research did you do on? I mean, what books have you read on Lizzie Borden and to come up with your theory? Because I really listened closely to the dialogue in your play, of course, and you know I have to give you kudos that you stuck pretty true to the facts of the case. You didn't like stray off to like something really crazy, that like a made up kind of thing. You had your facts down pretty good. So, how did you go about researching the whole thing to write your story?
So basically, I trying to remember what it was, but I remember. Oh, here it was. My Bible, I kind of call it that when I was doing this research, was I actually picked it up when I went to the Lizzie Borden house. It was The History and Haunting of Lizzie Borden by Rebecca F. Pittman,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
which, like, I'm not big into the supernatural stuff, but the history in that book, I was like, this is all just so concise and all just so perfectly laid out. So I remember, like, that was kind of like my go-to research manual when I was doing things. And I also remember just watching a lot of documentaries and listening to podcasts, just basically trying to consume as much Lizzie Borden related content as I could.
Now, did you see The Legend of Lizzie Borden with Elizabeth Montgomery from 1975? That's
Yet
that's my favorite. Yeah,
I absolutely adore that film.
yeah,
And I remember getting a little fangirly when I walked into Abby's bedroom and I'm like, oh my God, that's the acquittal dress.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, know it well. By Guy Verhill. The hat had been thrown away. When
Oh,
I first went to work there, it had just opened as a B&B, and they did try to get the hat. And it is on my Paper Doll website. You can download a copy of a paper doll of that dress. Everyone loves that dress. But it photographed or it filmed so different when you see it on. It's a size 4. Who knew that Elizabeth Montgomery was so tiny? And it just it looks very different on film. Um,
So, um, how did you like come around to uh deciding, like making choices in your script, like coming up with the idea that you're going to have Bridget literally blackmail Lizzie? Like, where did that come from?
so I want to say I remember very distinctly like driving off campus one day and just thinking about like, okay, I want to do Lizzie Borden. What am I gonna do with it? And I think at the time we were studying A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen, which
Mm,
so like I was like, okay, this is very interesting. It's like the idea of like Lizzie becomes Nora and then Bridget kind of becomes, oh, I'm blanking on character names, but the man who blackmails her and kind of that whole that's kind of like the party that happens is this big inciting incident. So like that was just kind of and then I think also because I remember wanting to focus on Lisbeth as or at least start with Lisbeth living in Maplecroft because we know so much about the trial. Like that was one
mhm.
thing I didn't want to do. I did not want to just write another the trial of Lizzie Borden story. I wanted to look at the aspects that we don't really talk about, like her life in Maplecroft, her relationship with Emma in the years following, the
mm.
relationship with Nance O'Neill. So, and then,
So,
but of
so
course,
did
you,
you? Well,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. No, no, go ahead. Finish your thing, and then I'll
Oh,
ask.
but of course, you can't also talk about Lizzie Borden without talking about the stuff that happened in Maple Street. So, I kind of really loved playing with the idea of having these flashbacks where Lizzie's kind of once she has to reckon with the ultimatum Bridget gives her, where
Mm.
like she's kind of forced to finally because in the play she in the beginning of the play she talks so much about oh it's been 13 years Emma we've moved past this we have all the things we could ever want she's kind of just forced to confront what really happened and make and like reckon with the choices that she has made.
Yeah. Now, I
So, oh,
noticed
go
you
ahead.
kind of went with a mean girl Abby instead of the sympathetic. And mean girl Abby we see in the Elizabeth Montgomery movie as well, slurping her soup and being revolting. And I'm wondering why you decided not to make Abby so sympathetic.
For me, I felt it was more important to have sympathy lie with both Lizzie and Bridget. And
Yes.
so naturally, Lizzie's main antagonist in the show is her father.
Hmm.
And so, yes, there is still the relationship with her stepmother as well. But I really needed someone to kind of be almost a foil to Bridget as well. So I was like, okay, Abby, and which I know is not actually what it was. From as far as my research seems, like Abby and Bridget had a fairly good relationship. There's the whole stuff that boggles my mind of like, oh, she wasn't allowed in the sitting room because she was Irish. But I definitely wanted to like create a foil for both of them. So like when Lizzie and Bridget do come together, there is like a shared common understanding of everything is garbage around us, but at least we have something.
Hmm.
We are
Hmm.
safe together.
Yeah, because that surprised me because you had Abby beating on on Bridget and I was like, wow, okay, because from all that I've ever read, Lizzie, I'm sorry, Abby and Bridget actually had a really good relationship. In fact, Abby paid Bridget extra money for her to stay on, and I believe for a buffer, between the girls and herself, is my understanding. So, and it's a theory, but in looking at that, it's a pretty solid theory. Just like looking at everything, and then from the Elizabeth Montgomery movie, they made Andrew as a like a tyrant kind of man too,
Mm,
and you
miserly.
know
Yeah.
insinuated incest as involved too, and you put both of those in your play, and I'm like, oh, okay. So you want to talk a little bit about that, like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something that I know has been done before, but I don't know why, but just kind of that idea of abuse was so interesting to me. Granted, I'm very fortunate where I haven't had to suffer that kind of abuse, but at the time I was writing it, I was dealing unfortunately with an emotional abuse of my own. So for me, it felt very cathartic to write about that one and how Lizzie handles it. Granted, I'm not saying go butcher your abusers with an axe, but that's kind of what I do love about the recent interpretations of the Lizzie Borden story, where it's not the monstrous woman defying her sex and doing something brutal. It is kind of becoming a story of Lizzie is a woman who has so much thrown against her, and it's her redeeming her power, redeeming her life, her liberty, her freedom.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean that makes total sense. I'm not upset that you did that or anything. I mean,
Oh, of
everybody has
course.
their own interpretation, but I just
We
wanted to
wondered
kind of know,
why. Yeah.
yeah, where it
Yeah.
came from because you seem like a very intelligent, really well-read person with a case. So you basically made a choice then that you were going to do that.
Oh yeah. I when I was writing the play, there were definitely it was definitely I remember having like two columns of like what are the facts and what are the inventions I'm going to create. Because while I could have very easily made like and that's what I do love about like Legend of Lizzie Borden because it does so well in both telling a very compelling story but also keeping so true to the facts is that in order to tell the story that I needed to tell, there was definitely going to have to be some invention. And while I'm very happy I was able to include a lot of the facts that I did include, I felt that, forgive me, my words are not the greatest tonight, but I definitely felt that while the fictional elements could be easily debated, but I felt like it was just very wonderful to just kind of keep the story flowing and also just kind of keep something that was just very compelling. I am sorry, that is just word soup. Interpret that for what you will.
Like, so I'm sorry. I was taking care of some Facebook people so they could join in on YouTube because everybody's asking where's the podcast. So I'm like typing at the same time. I'm trying to listen to
Yeah.
you. Did you mention did I miss it that how you became interested in the case to begin with, or no?
Uh,
Like
I
how did you
believe.
find out?
Oh yeah. I learned about it through Lizzie the musical, which is just
Oh right.
again,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Got you. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I was
Well,
like.
what did your friends think about it, Billy, when you were writing this? Did they think, wow, that's just kind of crazy? Were you supported by your friends? And, you know, and when you
That's a
casting the
good question,
parts,
Shelley.
yeah, I know what my friends think of my interest. Uh, and mostly I have Lizzie friends because the other ones have, given me up for hopeless.
Oh yeah, no. I say full out that I have been so lucky with especially this specific production of Lizzie that we
Mhm.
had just the most phenomenal cast. And I also just got to give a huge shout out to my director, Jess Reed, who's just the most wonderful human. Literally, I asked him to direct my show. We had done some theater projects before, and we ended up working at the same Starbucks. And I was like, "Hi, I wrote this show. I know you're a director. Take a gander." And literally, like a week later, she was like, "I would very much like to direct this, please."
Oh, I love it. Oh, support is everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and just also
Mhm.
we had a very lovely majority of just queer people in the room when we were with our cast and our crew, and it was just so lovely because I was like, okay, we're finally getting to tell this story with the people I wanted to be telling it, and also just to get that necessary feedback that while yes, I am queer myself, but I'm also not a woman. So it was lovely to have that feedback in the room of like, okay, we're on the right track, tweak this, and just
Mhm.
be able to tell the most authentic story that we could.
How did you audition the cast? How did you find the cast? And did they know about the Lizzie Borden story?
A couple of them did, some not so much. I actually remember when we did our first table read of it, we were not planning on doing this at all, but just our actor Allie, who played Elizabeth, just
Mhm.
started asking us questions, and it turned into like a 20-minute just like table conversation about the trial and all like the very interesting facts of the case. But yeah, we for auditioning, we just put out playbill.com is a lovely resource for anyone trying to cast a show. We will just put a breakdown and some sides from the script, and people are able to send us their self tapes, but which can always be a little hit or miss. But we just got extremely lucky with the crew that we got. And there was also a couple of people who, Deborah Rupi, who played our Abby, I've done multiple shows with, and I knew she's probably even a bigger Lizzie Borden fanatic than I am. And so having fellow Lizzie heads in the room was just such a joy because it's like we all kind of had just this common fascination with the case and wanting to tell this story.
Lizzie heads. I love it. That's a new one. You better copyright that real quick. Yeah. Here we have a
That's
comment. Growing
that's
up with
Holly.
Lizzie, my friends thought it was really cool. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks,
Oh,
Mom. That's her
Aw.
daughter.
yeah. Yeah, we always had Lizzie Borden Day at the high school where I would teach, and young people are very, very interested in the story because, one time or another, we all said, I could just kill my parents, and for one reason or another.
Yeah, I
So it
mean, I
has
think
a
it's
broad appeal. It really has a broad appeal
yeah,
across all demographics.
and it's
Oh,
crazy because once you visit the house, say, and you kind of get sucked in, and you're
Mhm.
sucked in for life. Then it's like once you're a Lizzie fan, you're always a Lizzie fan. It never dissipates, because you're always interested. If you're going to hear any more news about anything, that's undiscovered, or they're holding back at Fall River somewhere. And yeah, it's kind of the same with me 25 years ago when I went to the house, and then it just never left me. Like how could are were you always interested in Billy? Were you always interested in true crime in
Um,
general?
yeah, I think I like it kind of hit me like mid high school. I remember I just had like a big Jack the Ripper phase. Like
Yeah, me too.
Victorian murder, especially, always kind of intrigued me. We were talking about it earlier before we started. There's a lovely graphic novel series called A Treasury of Victorian Murder, which I cannot express my love for enough. They also have a copy about the Lizzie Borden case called The Borden Tragedy, which I highly recommend. But just kind of because like I enjoy listening about like modern true crime podcasts and things like that, but I don't know why. There's just like this certain je ne sais quoi about like these older cases, like where like
Yes.
the facts aren't so readily available, the technology isn't so readily available. It
Hmm.
just almost feels like this whole other world.
Especially Victorian crime. It's so
Yeah,
Sherlock
because there
Holmes
were no
gaslight in the
forensics.
fog, and yeah, and there's a lot of psychology and not so much just brutality. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's a big
Yeah,
appeal.
and what the fascination with me too is with Lizzie and the women in that case and the women of the time is they lived in a time of really patriarchal. They had no rights at all, and they acted a certain way, and they repressed a lot of their feelings. So I always felt like Lizzie snapped, holding in so much all the time and not being allowed to say really, on the inside what you really want to say. So I think she kept a lot of that bottled up inside, as many women
Wow.
back then. Like the cases that I researched, along with I was telling you other Victorian murderists, they all had a similar thing where they, like their husbands abused them and there was nothing they could do about it, or and then he would drink, or just like similar. They were all similar in that respect. So it was a hard time for women to live, I think.
And it's a story just full of women. Emma
Yeah.
and Miss O'Neill, and of course Lizzie and
Well,
Abby.
Billy, he put Hannah in the play, which
Yeah,
I found
love that.
interesting.
Love that
Yeah,
Hannah made an appearance. I went out to
that's
her
good.
grave not long ago. She's buried in Riverside, out outside of Providence.
Weren't they
And
weren't they friends, Shelley? Wasn't Hannah like one of Lizzie's favorite housemaids, right? In
yeah,
Maplecroft.
when you go to see her stone, which I understand Lizzie paid for, uh, it has sister on it. Sister.
Right.
That says a lot to me about she wasn't so much a servant as she was like family.
Yeah.
And of course, this is when Emma leaves Lizzie in 1905, and there's Lizzie alone with the servants for family. And
Mm.
she developed very close relationships with the people that worked for her, her chauffeur, um, the Terry family, and uh, Trudy Russell, her companion. But it is, and you have Mr. Borden. Of course, you have the Uncle John making a guest appearance and uh, being suspect number one for a while. But it's a lot about the interrelationships between and among, I should say, women, and that's what grabbed my attention. And I love how you have put a different spin on things and introduced characters unexpected that I've not seen used before, but they serve as great vehicles to get your lines across. Um,
Well, thank you. And
yeah,
I actually want to touch on something you mentioned, like that whole notion of like the servants after Emma left became Elizabeth's family. Uh,
yes.
for me as a queer person, there is just so much of found family is such a big thing in the queer community. And yes, Elizabeth's story in the play ends very sadly. She ends up losing her sister. But Emma has a line towards the end of the play where it's like, it's time for you and I to find families of our own.
Hmm.
And that is kind of something that, while yes, her story ends unhappily in the play, like she has Nance O'Neill to be there to comfort her for the time being. She eventually will have the servants who become more family to her. And that's kind of something that I wanted to at least leave for the audience, because there's unfortunately just a history of a lot of very unhappy stories, unhappy endings for queer relationships. And I wanted to at least leave that notion of there's still a chance. There's still a chance that Elizabeth will find this connection and love and family that we all need.
Hmm. Nice.
Well, it's really unique. I've seen a lot of Lizzie plays, and this is something very different. And a story as old as this that's been told in many ways, it's hard to come up with something thought provoking and unique that you have managed to do. Now, what are
Yeah,
your
and
hopes for the
yeah,
play?
I thought it was really well written. I thought the going back in time, like being in the present and then looking back,
The
at
flashbacks, yeah.
yeah, the flashbacks. Thank you.
Mhm.
Was really well done, and I like the idea that you don't really come out and say stuff like, but you kind of insinuate sometimes in the play. As far as Andrew and Lizzie's relationship, it was just a small little teeny part in there that
The
insinuated
massage on
it.
the
Yeah.
back,
But
yes,
that was it. It
yes.
was so quick and just done, and it was almost like you planted a seed but you didn't want to pursue it. It's just it's a possibility.
It
I
leaves some
like
room for the imagination to come
yeah,
in.
I
Yeah.
mean, and I like the specific characters that you put in the play. And that Bridget comes back. The one thing that you sent Bridget off to Ireland first, and then to Montana in the play. I don't think she ever went back to Ireland. I think she went straight to Montana. So that little, but there's arguments with that. I have to say that
Yeah,
some
yeah.
people think that Bridget was paid
Mm.
off and like moved to Ireland for a while and then Montana, but there's no proof of it.
Mhm.
So, but there is proof that she was in Montana, of course.
Oh,
So,
abundant, yes.
right, right.
Yeah.
But I like that you brought her back to the States. That was good. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. And I honestly had so much fun with the character of Bridget because, like you said, there's just like so much of her history that we're missing after the
Yes.
trial. So Bridget
Mhm.
kind of became like a character where it's like when it came to like having to like find things to like drive the story forward, like she was kind of like the character I would use a lot. Like the we have no proof her mother was Scottish in any way, but like getting her a little bit of backstory that she could share with Elizabeth, or just like that story of like how her history came and how she came back. Like she was just such a very fun, malleable character to work with.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I picked up on that with the Loch Lomond, the singing of the Loch Lomond that you've worked into it. Little touches like that. Some are very subtle, but if you know, you know.
yes, and the character, I mean, the actress that you got to play with the Irish accent was excellent.
Oh,
It was really
fabulous.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
Anna Maria, I love her so
yeah.
dearly. We got to work together on a production of Columbinus back in like 2019, and she's just nothing short of a joy to work with. So getting to have her on this project was just, again, we got so lucky with our cast. Like, I just love getting to work with my friends.
I understand that.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I get that. They did a
before we
really
got
good
off
job.
on a tangent, what's going to happen next? Where are we going with the play next?
Well, like I've said before, the biggest thing that's changed since the reading was the change of the title to Lisbeth of Maplecroft.
Mhm.
Because again, I wanted to really reflect Lisbeth's journey of growth as a person throughout the play. And I feel that name is a big thing for her, just to, this is who I really am and the person I want to be. And as for the production itself, I'm just sending it out to every theater I could possibly think of. And who knows, if there's interest in it again, maybe I'll do another virtual reading of it again next year. But yeah, I just definitely, Lizzie's this story's journey is not done yet. Like, I'm going to continue pursuing and using this lovely story to and just see where it goes. And I kind of owe a thanks to Lisbeth herself. I definitely remember when I was in college, I mentioned I stopped by the gravesite, and I just remember talking to Lizzie and being like, "Hi, I know I'm writing your story, and I hope that you will allow me to continue to use this. And thank you for giving me something to work with, and just thank you," which is just such a strange feeling. But I myself and a lot of other theater artists owe a great deal of debt to Lizzie Borden.
So what have you?
Many
I
of
mean,
us
there's
do. Yes.
irony. I mean, what do you think about Lizzie being a theater enthusiast in her
Oh,
life?
the moment I found out Lizzie loved going to the theater, I was like, okay. I was just like fangirling in my seat. And just even the relationship with Nance O'Neill, just like the fact that she was an admirer of the arts when she finally was able to live the life she wanted. She was
Mhm. Mhm.
immediately just a patron of the arts. And that was just kind of heartwarming to me. It almost was like, I feel like she will, even if she doesn't like how I've portrayed her, she will be happy that I am continuing her story in a medium that she loves.
Yes. Yes,
That's
we get it.
fabulous. Yeah.
And you're not crazy. I talk to her all the time. I was at the grave yesterday to leave a rose. And well, I mean, the things you find on Lizzie's grave. There
So
was
many
a
coins. I remember
oh,
just so many coins on the stone.
Yeah,
yeah,
what's the
there
purpose
were.
of that coins? I don't get that. Like, am
Mm.
I don't understand why they
I
throw
think there was
coins.
like I
Is
think
there?
there's like an old tale of like I think it's like a Victorian thing where it's like you left like tuppence on like a dead man's eye so like he could
I
pay the ferrymen at like the
you
river
yes,
Styx.
that's right. That's right. You had to pay the ferryman to row you across, and but stones too. You see stones. I found a bottle of Tabasco sauce, jewelry, rubber bands. Okay, Tabasco sauce, and a big black plastic spider. Don't ask. I don't know what that
Wow.
was about. But people feel they know her, and when they come to see her, I've been talking to her for 32 years. You do. They want to be photographed with her headstone, and they like to leave something to show they've been there. Sadly, you don't ever see anything on Abby and Andrew. So you have the poor victims who forgotten mostly. It's all about Lizzie. It's all about the
Yeah,
gal.
and
So,
and that's a thing too. Like, um, when you ask that question of like if you could talk to anyone dead or alive, who would it be? And mostly everybody says Lizzie, right? But I go with Abby because I want to ask her. You saw who killed you. You know, it's like I would take a different approach to that. So,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Billy, how do you feel about, the paranormal? It's real big now, too. The seances and yeah. And you did say that you're not too much into that scene.
I mean, it's definitely not my biggest interest. I mean, definitely if you take like sorry, I'm trying to think of a word. If you take comfort in that, then by all means do your thing. But there are
Mhm.
just sometimes like I was even like reading the history and haunting of Lizzie Borden where I'm like, this feels sort of a little exploitative. Cause like I even remember we were leaving the Lizzie Borden house and a friend of mine was walking with me and I was like, "Are you okay? You've been a little quiet." And she goes, "I just feel it just feels a little wrong, some of the things they have there." I'm like, "What do you mean? There was a fabulous place. It's restored beautifully." And she goes, "Yeah, but it's still a place where people died. And there's a
Mhm.
bloody hatchet on the couch where it happened." And I'm
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
"Okay, that's a fair point." And so like
Yeah.
for me, a lot of like the ghost hunting things that I see where it's just like again, if that's your interest, by all means go for it. But this is still a crime. Two
Mhm.
people were killed. And I feel like you have to at least acknowledge that when you're doing that, that this is a place
Yeah.
where unfortunately something terrible happened. And you have to, I prefer to try to remember the humanity of it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say it. No one ever
Yeah, me
paid for
too.
that crime.
Mm.
They were never vindicated, the victims. And it's important to remember that too. We just heard from Pam Howe, long time Lizzie Head. By the way, Lizzie Head is trending. I'm seeing it light up all over the place now on my social media. I'm telling you, you needed to get a copyright on that one. But she says she
Lizzie Head, I
leaves
love it.
flowers on, all the graves. I leave flowers on August 4th on Abby and Andrew, but I can go
Mm.
away and come back a
Mm.
couple hours later and somebody has moved them over to Lizzie. So the flowers go back and forth all day. It's like a tug of war who
Oh
gets the
my
flowers.
God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Billy, you got to come up on August 4th. I'll
Mm.
meet you and we will have a real
Oh, set the date. I
Lizzie
am
tour.
there.
See, the
Okay.
gruesomeness factor is celebrated by some people, and I think it's disgusting.
The gruesomeness, yeah. Yeah.
This is true. This is true.
Oh,
You know,
hashtag
I
Lizzie heads.
Lizzie Head.
Okay.
I was gonna
We're
say, if
well
going
you
maybe
guys
viral.
maybe you
don't have like a
started
T-shirt with that in like a month from now, what are y'all doing?
Oh
you know
no.
the slang section they have in the back of the dictionary. It's like a real small section. I don't know if you ever read that, but it's like slang words and they're actual words. You could put Lizzie Heads back there.
Lizzie heads for sure.
I love it.
Hashtag Lizzie heads. Yeah.
It sounds like a band, right? It should be a band,
Oh, it ought to be.
like a
Ooh.
punk rock
Well,
band or
there
something.
was a band called, wasn't there one called Lizzie Borden? Lizzy. I don't know if it was
Lizzie,
metal.
I think it was just Lizzie. Like, yeah,
It was
maybe.
all
Yeah,
women.
it was like Lizzie Borden and the Axes or something. I'm trying to remember because I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're merchandising her in a big way. Lizzie in pop culture. I mean, gosh, there's games and right. I'm in my Lizzie room, Billy. You'd love it in here. This is 32 years of collecting where I'm sitting. In fact,
Yeah. Oh,
over my right shoulder, you see Lizzie in a frame, and I have a life size standing Lizzie it back here in the corner.
I
And
just
I
um
take her with me everywhere.
I just
Oh, I
googled
love
Lizzie
that.
Borden band, and there is a Lizzie Borden band. They're a heavy
Yeah,
metal band. Like
heavy
one of
metal,
their
all
songs is
women.
called "Under Your Skin."
Ah,
Like, yeah,
yeah. So there was another musical about Lizzie that played the Norma Terrace here in Connecticut, and I think Chris was it McGovern
The Chris
wrote.
McGovern one. Actually, one of the
oh,
beautiful things about being a playwright is I'm on a website called New Play Exchange or NPX, it's abbreviated to, and
Yeah,
it's a lovely resource for playwrights where we can create a profile and we can like put our plays up and people can read them. And I remember when I was doing my research, I signed up for NPX and I found M- Chris McGovern's page and I found the
yes,
script
yes.
for the Lizzie musical and I was like, oh my God, it exists. Because I
It's
was just
beautiful. It's beautiful.
frantically searching Google trying to find something of this.
Yeah, my favorite from that production was House on a Hill. When Lizzie sings House on a Hill, sitting on the bed alone in her room, it just tears your heart out. You
Oh,
never think of Lizzie in that way. That her
I
whole
never do
dream,
for sure.
her whole dream is getting out of there and moving up to where she feels she belongs. It's very compelling. I've seen it a couple of times. Oh, my daughter says, Billy, I'm on it. I'm designing a T-shirt with Lizzie head on it. Uh,
yes!
hey, we're going to finance your
Yeah, and
play,
Pamela
selling
went
the
to the play
T-shirts.
at Norma Terrace.
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
Yeah, so
this
they
is
said that play was really good.
it was amazing, and the soundtrack you can buy.
Oh,
It's a
I love that
CD.
soundtrack. The woman who
Mm.
plays Lizzie, her name's escaping me, but I loved
Um,
her because
red hair.
I
Yes, red hair. Mm.
uh she's the original Martha on the Secret Garden Broadway musical. And I was like,
Oh, I
oh my
didn't know
God,
that.
I know her. And I absolutely adore her.
She was amazing. She was. The whole cast was great. And then the murder scene, when the theater, the stage goes to dark, all you see is the arm with the hatchet. Whose arm is it? You're never sure. It's always the big question mark.
Oh, and the younger Lizzie playing with the dolls, that just
Yes.
did me.
Yeah.
'Cause I remember just when I found that script, I was like, how were they going to do the murders? Because again,
Mm.
it's one of those things where it's like you can't butcher someone with an axe on stage, or if you're going to, you have to be very creative about it. Like I went like big like lights and silhouettes, like that was like if I were to stage it, that's how I would do it. But this
Yes.
just like young Lizzie just playing with these dolls, I was like, that is chilling.
Hmm. Hmm. And the murder scene
Mm.
as well. Yeah. Well, you have to leave room for different points of view. I break it up into a few groups. You have the people who love Lizzie and just no way in the world that she have anything to do with the murders. And then you have the people who, yeah, she probably did it, but I wish she didn't. Because we like Lizzie, we wish she didn't do it. And then you have the diehards, she did it. Yeah, cold blooded. And so, which one of those three groups do you fit in?
For me, I kind of fall, I think, between the latter two, where it's like I love Lizzie as a human, and
Hmm.
I'm for me, it's either she did it or John Morse did it. But
Okay.
I definitely believe like her, Lizzie, her, Emma, and John. Like this felt just way too coordinated. John just happens to come down unannounced the day before. Emma just happens to be going away, and Lizzie just departs her trip and just steers back unannounced the same night. And then John Morse happening to know like the names of the 6 Irish Catholic priests on his train car. I'm like, this is all premeditated and planned, and it's way too perfect. Something shady happened between all three of you. And also,
Okay.
And there's a couple comments. There's another group that said she didn't do it on her own. She had help. And
Oh,
then
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Another group. So we're up to four groups. I fall into I think she probably did it, but I wish she hadn't, you know. So people get very passionate about their theory and how
oh,
they
Yeah.
feel and can
And
really
David
lock horns with you.
Yeah, David Wolf said Lizzie seems to be someone who had a lot of anger and frustration. I think we can all relate to that. Lizzie may represent our psychological desire to do what she probably did. He thinks she did it.
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
the psychology of it, sure. And a play is the perfect vehicle for drawing those feelings out of people. It's ideal. It's suited. The story is suited for stage production. It
Oh yeah,
truly
I
is.
remember being like my main like argument because on top of the play, when I was in college, I had to write like a 10-page paper just like defending kind of like what I was doing as my senior thesis and just kind of going in on how like to the outside observer who's not aware of the facts of the case, when they're presented to them, they have almost like a this is just too good to have just happened naturally. Like it has all of like the compelling elements of a good story. Like
Hmm.
these family tensions, this small house, like all of the elements of the case. Like you could have told me they were fictionalized and I probably would have bought it. But the fact that it wasn't is just so fascinating where we're like we need to know what happened or we have to invent what happened to satiate ourselves.
We have a question for you, Billy. Did you read the trial transcripts?
I did read parts of them.
Hmm.
uh what was the other book that I it was the more recent book. It was The Trial of Lizzie
Oh,
Borden.
yeah, Kara Robinson's book, The Trial of Lizzie Borden, came out a couple years ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
good one. Very good one. Hmm.
I've never sat down and read the full trial transcripts
Hmm.
because again, I wanted to focus more on just like Lizzie's life afterwards. Like the trial I feel has just been it's so fascinating, but it's been done to death as a story. So I wanted to focus on something else, but absolutely, there are just so many fascinating things in that trial.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. Well, that could be your next big play,
or not in the trial,
or
or
not
Well,
in
left
the
out
trial.
of the trial. Yeah.
Yeah.
for me, I remember just one of the things that I love, especially about the Lizzie Borden case, is how much of this case was can a woman do something like this? And to the point where, like, every single thing about the trial about Lizzie, because she never spoke, but everyone's just like, her eyes are on her, seeing how she behaves, what she's
Hmm.
wearing, like,
Hmm.
and her, under the guise of her lawyers, doing so much to present herself as the model Victorian grieving daughter. And I think there's one, and there's like that age old thing from that time period where poison is the woman's weapon. Like,
True.
surely we can't be convinced that a woman of such good breeding and social standing could commit such a heinous crime. Heck, even her defense team made a point to like liken Lizzie Borden to the jury's wives and daughters.
Exactly. Well, do you think today, if we tried that today and there were women on the jury, it might have gone a different way?
I want to say yes, but
Yeah.
also, like Kimber said, there's just so much there that never made it onto the floor of the courtroom
Oh,
that
sure.
is just really necessary in order to, I feel, get a proper case verdict. I mean, the fact that the prussic acid never got on trial, or heck, even Lizzie's own testimony never made it there, is just
Yeah, and that
Her
was huge.
inquest.
infuriating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the
If you read
prussic
anything,
acid.
read that. You know, it's
And the
like that
dress
was huge.
burning. Oh man, the dress burning thing. Yeah.
Do
Those
you
three
think
things.
yeah, do you Joanne's asking, do you, Billy, do you think that being a woman in that time actually worked in her favor?
For the being in court, I will say sort of yes, but it's very much a double-edged sword. Because again, being a woman, I feel in that time is just like we've been talking about. It's you are locked in a box that you have very limited mobility to be in. And while being this model Victorian woman in the courtroom served to her advantage to appease these 12 men, even after the trial, she was treated horribly in her own community that she wanted so much to be a part of
Hmm.
because she was basically excommunicated, which, well, I don't think a man would do terribly better than she did, but I can't say that I feel like being a woman who's been accused of murder is going to do her any favors in that time.
Hmm.
For sure. Especially the church folks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, incident that happened at the Rock Street Congregational Church. Uh, but it's good to know that she did find some lady friends who stood by her, and she wasn't quite uh, a social pariah.
Yeah. And those, well, okay, so you can't get away from the fact that she was clean, hair not messed up, and there was no blood trail ever.
Yeah, yeah, you can't get
And
away from.
David made a comment, being a suppressed woman who overcame her situation and led the life she always wanted, but at what price?
What price?
Yeah. So those
Well,
women you were talking about, those friends, I ironically enough, they were women that promoted women's rights, so to speak. I mean, there's that whole element in this story too, of after she went to Maplecroft, who her friends really were in Washington D.C. and um, like her mother actually
oh
hung
yeah,
out with Mary Livermore, who was a reporter, right, Shelley? And
yeah.
she was all for women's rights.
Yes,
So
the suffragists, women's suffrage.
yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That played a big part in this story too. I feel anyway, me personally.
Well,
The women's
they were
suffrage movement,
strong single women who broke the mold.
and they
And
all had
Helen,
money.
yeah, Helen Layton, uh,
Yes,
it was independent and worked. It's often been said if Lizzie had had a job, had to work like Alice Russell, and
Yeah.
had to make a life for herself, things might have gone very differently. But these were women that were too, wealthy or a high enough social standing. They didn't work, um, and
And
they
one
had a
of them
lot of
was even,
lot of time on their hands.
and
Yeah.
one of them even, her husband worked for President Roosevelt.
Oh, you're talking about Lizzie's cousin, Grace Hartley Howe, who was the
Yes.
first female postmistress of Fall
Yes.
River back when
Yes.
women didn't hold positions like that.
Right.
So she befriended some women who were very strong. Lizzie's doctor was Dr. Annie McCrae. And for a
Right.
female
First, one of the
doctor,
first women doctors.
yeah,
Yes.
oh
So I'm
Okay,
yes,
I just
saying,
gotta say,
what I'm
first and
saying is,
foremost, oh, sorry.
no,
I
go
just gotta say,
ahead. Go
first and
ahead.
foremost, thank you so much for saying that because I remember I was actually pulling it up while we were talking. I had kept in touch with the man who toured the Lizzie Borden house with me, Richard M. Toldo, and I remember
Rick,
frantically texting him. I was like, "Who was Lizzie's doctor after the
yes,
trial?
Mm,
Because I
yes,
cannot find anything." And we just eventually settled on Dr. Bowen. Probably stayed on. So thank you
yeah.
because you just answered a question I've had
oh,
for
no,
years.
It was
yeah, Dr.
Annie.
Annie
Annie.
McRae,
Yeah.
and she was with Lizzie at the end. Of course, Lizzie passes in 27. Lizzie didn't have the greatest health. I've read a letter she had written to a neighbor who had a noisy rooster that kept her awake. I saw the original of that letter, and
So,
she said, I don't sleep well. I'm of a nervous disposition. And of course, she had her gallbladder removed,
yes.
and
So that
and
was
her
at the True. What was that hospital called? The
Truesdale,
Truesdale.
Truesdale,
And Annie was
yeah.
one of the first female doctors to be in that hospital,
Oh
wasn't she?
yes,
Yes.
yes.
So there's a story with it. Like, I hate to say it though, Billy, but you should read my book because I have all of that in there, all of the women facts in there about how important it was. Like, I feel Lizzie did it, but I feel she did it out of being repressed and not being allowed to have rights as as a woman, and if you look at her life, she hung, like we were talking about, she hung out with some very, or knew very powerful women in her life,
Professional
and
women,
professional
professional
women,
women in a
and they were
man's
just,
world.
and
Mhm.
in that time, like 1892 and on into like 1920, they were just coming to terms with women getting better jobs and taking like better positions, because up until then they weren't allowed to work. They were allowed to be a school teacher and maybe a nurse or something, but
Oh
nothing,
sure.
nothing really
Well,
substantial.
yeah,
Oh,
that went on.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like,
We have a question here. Her
Yes,
pals were independent, mainly unmarried women of the leisure class. These were the first liberated women. Yeah, some of these
absolutely,
oh yeah,
gals.
absolutely.
Yeah.
absolutely. Like even the relationship she had with Nance O'Neill, like
Hmm.
being friends with an actor. Like I remember being a playwright, you just end up having to like kill your babies a little bit. But I remember I had like this whole thing where she and Nance had a conversation about Nance's life as a woman who was on the stage at the time and how
Mhm.
like there's so much history of actors being denied access to hotels, like all of this stuff. There's a little bits of it still there, but again, it's sort of like outcasts find outcasts in my
Yes.
experience. So
Right.
Yeah.
naturally,
Well,
of
Yes.
course, these
being
people
a woman
gravitate to each
actor
other.
back then was really not a very respectable job.
No,
Like
this
being
is
being a
true.
woman actor.
I like
But
that. Outcast find outcast. That's true. Birds of a feather, and they support each other. I went out to Tingsboro when I was working on Miss O'Neill's life, and she had a really colorful time of it. Uh, Lizzie was very generous with her. It didn't last a long time, and of course, Miss O'Neill ends up at Inglewood, home for distressed actresses in New Jersey.
oh wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, and they asked her about
Mm.
meeting Miss Borden, and Miss O'Neill always had glowing things to say. What a wonderful person. Um, she was cremated. It took me a long time to find out where. Miss O'Neill was, and she's in a columbarium with her husband, who was an actor out in California. I have the name of it somewhere, but it took a while to find her. But she spent her final days in New Jersey in the Inglewood home. Now there's a lady I would like to talk to.
So Tracy Kennedy said that I think I may have told you I graduated from Kingsborough High School. I think it's Kingsborough High School. So that's in New
Kingsborough, yeah,
Kingsborough. Okay. Um, and then
that's
David, there's like the feed is going wild. So David, it's a struggle to imagine Lizzie as a woman who rose above her situation and be happy about that, but we would never be able to justify killing another, yet we live vicariously through this crime. Yes, we
well,
all
and we
do.
can all
Absolutely do.
Well, if it was a solved crime, we wouldn't be here.
yeah. Well, that's it. One of the big reasons I think it's still so in the public mind is that it was unsolved. No one ever, you know, uh, was charged after she was acquitted. They didn't
Right.
pursue any other person for it, and there's something about unfinished business that drives us nuts. We think we can go to the house. Did you feel that way, Billy, when you're looking around like maybe I'll see something that, and I'll know something that someone's missed? I feel that way every
Oh,
day.
absolutely. Like, there's something so strange and just fascinating about being able to go back to the scene of the actual crime. And thank God, like, the Lizzie Borden house is just so immaculately preserved. But yeah,
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
you can't help but, again, that's our big draw to this, is the fact that we don't have the solution. We get to kind of piece that together for ourselves. And so
Yeah.
I just remember, like, walking through and, like, just you don't think it's gonna happen, but there's still like that little end yet that whispers in the back of your head that you just kind of can't really put away. And it
You
What
just
have
part
that
of
with a lot of other like crime houses, so to speak, right? They made hers a bed and breakfast, but I mean, you don't have that like with O.J. Simpson's house, or you know what I'm saying? Like other crime houses, it's I
Mhm.
think it's like strange, kind of in a
It's the
way,
house
and
is like its own little microcosm. You get in there and
yeah, it's
time
weird.
stands still. What was your well, favorite's probably not the right word, but as you were going through the house, and Rick is a wonderful tour guide. Known Rick, uh, helped to train him when he first got there. What room or area really spoke to you? Remember, if you close your eyes and think back.
I feel like it's gonna be a tie between two rooms. So I say the honest answer is definitely gonna be Lizzie's bedroom. Because again, just
Oh,
that whole second floor is just such a fascinating kind of just like shoebox diorama of their lives. Like
exactly.
like all the stuff that we don't talk about, like the fact that Lizzie was an avid reader and like how she signed all of her own books. But then
I
Mhm.
you
love
also
that.
see like the dresser that's pushed against the door to Andrew and Abby's bedroom, and you're like, wow, they had no privacy whatsoever. So that's
Mhm.
probably the first one that really had an impact on me. The
Yeah.
second, and I think this is more an ode to Rick just being a very good storyteller and tour guide,
Yes,
was when
yes.
he took us into the dining room and he was telling us how we were right underneath the guest room and how Abby was a larger woman, so you couldn't help. So how does Lizzie not hear the thud? And he just hits the floor, and the whole room rattled. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm. It kind of really hit me then, and I was like, I am in a crime scene.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and so you brought all of that, you used all of that trip and these thoughts when you went to write your play. Yeah. You have to see that place. You have to go to the house. I think it's imperative.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
And here's David. When I went through the house the first time, I felt electricity over my entire body in Lizzie's bedroom. I did not feel this anywhere else. Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
bedroom is just so fascinating to me, especially also when you learn the fact that, because again, just another, God love Emma Borden. She's there, but she gets overlooked so much, and she gives so much of herself to Lizzie when you read about it. And it's really another one of those things when you find out that that was originally Emma's room. And after
Mhm,
Lizzie's tour
mhm.
of Europe, Emma traded rooms with her so she could have a larger room. And it's just,
Well, you're absolutely right. And but I think the only reason Emma did that is because she made a promise to her mother that she would always look after Lizzie. And if Emma didn't, on her deathbed. So back then, being the proper woman that she was, if she ever deterred from that, she would have tremendous guilt. So I think she really took up and cared for her little sister for as long as she could endure it. That means not talking about anything that she may have known. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's just that's the feeling I got. And even when Emma moved to Maplecroft, she had the same size bedroom as she did in 92nd Street. And Lizzie had the larger room and two rooms. Not only one bedroom but two bedrooms. So it was always about Lizzie, never about Emma. I think Emma was like really kind of a
Retiring. Yeah.
humble
Mm, mm.
woman, a religious woman to the
Yeah.
T.
But I've always looked at her as a dark horse too. Sometimes it's the quiet ones where the wheels are turning. And notice, it was
True.
Emma Borden that went to Mr. Borden and said at the sale of the Whitehead house that was deeded to Abby, "What you do for her people, you should do for your own flesh and blood."
Ooh,
It
there's a lot
wasn't
of
Lizzie.
comments flowing.
Yeah, it wasn't Lizzie who complained. It was Emma. I think Emma was a much tougher cookie than we give her credit for, and she had a lot of influence on Lizzie as a child.
Well, we're
Uh,
finding this out from
yeah.
other people in our, like Emma. David said that Emma seemed to be very hateful towards Abby. And then there's another comment: Emma was as guilty as Lizzie. She turned Lizzie against Abby, which is interesting
Hmm.
too to
Hmm.
say. Yes.
Well, sure, no 5-year-old child is going to hate somebody, but when their mother, Sarah Morse, died, I mean, see, Emma was born in 51. Sarah died when 63, and then he remarried Abby in 65. So Emma was 9 years older and remembered her natural mother, her biological mother,
Mm.
whereas Lizzie was just, a little toddler. So she brought a whole different dynamic to the stepmother from the get go. And she was, puberty had arrived. Um, so once again, you have all kinds of the female conflict in the tiny space. And she certainly had a lot of influence on her younger sister. So
So
there's that.
so Billy, I want to ask you, when did you start? When did you start writing? And have you written other plays, or is this your first one? Or
so I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I feel like it wasn't until college though that I seriously began seriously looking at writing and specifically playwriting as the format.
mm-hmm.
I had written a play before this called The Many Gay Adventures of Nicholas Lorenstein, which is a very different tone. It is a kind of a spoof, like a very gay LGBTQ focused farce.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I had actually gotten that accepted into a college theater festival that
Oh,
same year I
nice.
wrote it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the step in the right direction. And so, but that was only a one act. So Lizzie was my first attempt at a full length play. And
Yes.
Oh,
I've
wow.
written other
Okay.
things since. But
Hmm.
yeah, Lizzie has a very special place in my heart. Again,
I can
just,
see that. Yes.
Hmm.
Are you working on something else at the moment? A new
ah,
project? Yeah.
potentially. I'm still figuring out some details, but there might be a potential for either a reading or possibly a production of another play that I wrote happening in New York. I'm still just, I have to have a meeting to discuss like details of it, but yeah, things are in the works. And also, I'm currently getting myself ready to, because again, I went to school for acting, which I'm still grateful for, but I feel like definitely my skills would be, as a writer, would be enhanced in an academic environment. So I'm also prepping myself to try to go back to school for playwriting. So
Oh, good. Oh, good for you.
Have you
Yeah.
got a particular school in mind?
uh, I am really impressed with Hunter College in New York. Just
Okay.
the program looks absolutely fabulous. And also, there's a playwright who I love, Lloyd Sue, who's either on the board or he teaches at the university, but he wrote a lovely play called The Chinese Lady that went up at the Public uh, last summer. And it's all about the first Chinese woman to have been brought to America. And she was displayed, I believe, in like the Barnum and Bailey Museum in like a little box that was supposed to represent all of China. And
Hmm.
just such a lovely, just kind of examination. And I absolutely adore his writing. So that's just another draw for me.
Nice. Very
Sounds like
good.
you keep very busy with projects. That's great to have that energy.
Oh yeah. I have a I have a brain that never turns off, so I might as well just do something productive with it.
Right,
Oh,
right.
oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Yes, do it when you're young and
Well,
peppy.
I think you did a really, really fine job with the play. Um, it was interesting, and it stayed
Different.
true pretty much to the facts,
Yeah.
and a really interesting perspective take on
And
it.
we wish
And
you well with that, and
yeah,
you
definitely,
keep
definitely.
us posted.
And you should stay in touch with me because I'm
Mhm.
at a place called Hub 17. It's on Staten Island. We do black box theater here. And
Ooh.
I am producing a show, hopefully, if I get the grant, this fall. It's called The Grand Guignol, and it's called The Theater of Horror. And it's four different plays, two pertaining to heaven and two pertaining to hell. And our courtyard is going to be purgatory. So
Oh,
where the guests like hang out, and then they go in one theater and see the two heaven plays, and then they go and get the gist. So
yeah,
we're
yeah.
we're working this out,
I
but we do black box theater here. We do a lot of stuff here at Hub 17, but I'm always recruiting writers and actors, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So oh, there you go.
I I hope you visited Salem, not far from Lizzie Borden's house.
I
Lots of
actually
I've
inspiration.
did.
never been to Salem.
Oh
Have
yeah,
you?
I
Oh.
luckily, again, my friends who are also Lizzie heads who went to the original trip with me to Fall River, they're also just very spooky minded. So when we found out we were like a 3 hour trip away from Salem, we were like, okay, we're doing a day trip.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
yeah, just absolutely such a fun time. Fun time.
Yeah, the whole area in New England, there's so many things you could make a vacation, start in Fall River and just Salem and keep on going, go to the Cape. Lots to see in the area for sure. But you'll keep us posted on what happens with your Lizzie play, with the
Oh,
new title now of Lisbeth of Maplecroft, and
yeah.
uh, and the wonderful actors that you found to portray. Uh, Very memorable. I'm hoping we're going to hear more about this very soon.
Oh, absolutely. And also, just first and foremost, I just got to thank both you, Shelly, and you, Kimbra, for both having me here and just also being so kind and generous and like helping us promote the show. Like, again, I wrote this as a love letter to Elizabeth, and I'm glad that we were able to just bring so many people who also are just passionate about who she was and her story. So, just big thank you for just getting us out there and just allowing us to do our thing. Like it means the world.
I don't know. We enjoyed this. I don't know about you, but I had fun with this conversation.
Yeah,
It was
so
really a
did
lot of
I.
fun to talk with you.
And you
Yeah,
have an invitation anytime. I would love to show you
Shelly would
Lizzie
take your
Land.
tours.
I will show
Oh,
you
please
everything.
do.
Yeah, and we'll wear our Lizzie head shirts, okay?
Amen to that.
I'll do the hat.
With
Just a
matching
bucket
hat.
hat.
Okay.
Yeah, the Lizzie Thin Lizzie is the name of the heavy metal rock band. Thin Lizzie. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, she's around forever. This story is immortal. As they say, she's got legs in the theater for sure. Mm.
Lizzie Hedge Unite. Oh God, you know what? We're never gonna live this down. You started something, Billy. We're never gonna live it down.
We're
Oh,
going viral, baby.
love it.
Billy, you're a joy to listen to. Best of luck from Joanne up in, she's in the Concord, Mass area. And Joanne used to play Mrs. Churchill on August 4th.
Ah,
So, yeah, I've got a lot of people for you to meet, Billy. And when this hits Broadway, I hope there's a place for us.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
Oh yeah. That's true, right? We should
so
have the
far,
VIP pass.
you bet. I've
just
outlived them all except for Emma Borden. I'm working on outliving Emma. That's my next thing.
absolutely. Just one night I buy out the theater. It's just all Lizzie heads. Like,
I
that's
love
the
it.
theater I want. Just a bunch of people obsessed with Victorian true crime.
Well, she would play well in Fall River. I think you should
Yes.
open in Fall River. And in Westerly, Rhode Island, the Granite is ideal for that type of venue that you're talking about.
Ooh.
So I can't wait. Thank you so much. Love you all. That's David
Yeah.
Wolf.
And yes, I
And
want to thank everybody for coming. You know, our regulars got a little confused because we had a glitch with Facebook Live, so you know, I had to steer them over to here, but they all made it. Yay. And I want
it's
to thank all of
crazy.
you for coming and being here. Joanne, David, Tracy, you
The
know,
time
Pam,
just flew. It just
yeah,
flew.
you guys, you know, you're always like here and support us, and we really totally really appreciate it
Hmm.
so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Billy, for being here, being our guest, and keep it going, keep writing. And you should give me your information afterwards so I can stay in touch and let you know what's
And
going
me too,
on
so I can
over here
plan
in
your
Staten
VIP
Island,
tour.
where everybody thinks it's part of Jersey, but it's not. It's still part of New York.
Oh, believe me, you're not getting rid of me this easily.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
You got an
All
old
right.
auntie in New England. Yes.
Ah,
And
We're
to,
going
I'll
to
take
and
it.
adopt you. Good times
oh
coming.
gosh.
Welcome to the Lizzie family, Billy.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. We're
the
good
head
All right.
people.
queen.
A little
And
crazy,
we
but
are
good people.
yeah, we're gonna sign off now, but until next time, that will be what is it, February, March? It'll be in April. April. We'll see you then, and everyone have a great night, and we'll talk to you.